Hello and welcome to Bold New Democracy's new series, BND In Depth. In this series, we will be talking with leaders and activists working on issues that have a direct effect on your life and on our political system. In this episode, our guest will be Michaela Oldfield from the Greater Cincinnati Regional Food Policy Council. You can check them out at cincinnatiregionalfood.org.
Hello, I'm Sue Ellen Shoup, a volunteer with Bold New Democracy, a progressive political organization that has decided to try and work together with the Greater Cincinnati Regional Food Policy Council to show some of our political activists how food is affected by policy. Michaela Oldfield, the director of the Food Policy Council, is going to be our guide, and she will introduce the work that the Policy Council does and point us towards some actions that activists might take. We are also interested in educating both activists and eaters of some steps they might take to help create food policies that serve everyone. Michaela, why is a Food Policy Council needed?
Thank you, Sue Ellen, for inviting me to do this, first off. So a Food Policy Council is, we're an organization that convenes people from across the food system to work on creating healthy, equitable, sustainable food systems. And so what that means is we're working together to identify collective needs and to collaborate on securing funding and leveraging each other's impact to have an impact that we wouldn't be able to have as organizations on our own. And the reason to have this kind of a structure is the food system is incredibly complex. It's a little bit like the blind men trying to identify the elephant, that we've got everybody working on different pieces of it, and we can really achieve more if we're working together and working on the whole thing together, and we need a space for convening and having that collaboration. And so that's how we know each other. And you told me you've been reading some stuff that has been opening your eyes into the sort of policy history and policy world of the food system.
Yes, I have become aware that how food is produced has been affected throughout history by the way that land use and abuse has taken place in this country. Mark Bittman's book, Animal Vegetable Junk, is a history of food from sustainable to suicidal. He points out, and everybody can notice this when they go to the grocery, that a great deal of junk food is lining the shelves. And there's only a small percentage of what I call real food. In other words, fruits, vegetables, and whole food products that are available to the ordinary shopper. It's clear that this has to be affecting our health. Bittman's book explains that the economics of food production, processing, and advertising is what's led us to this point. So over 90% of available food comes from corn, wheat, soy, and animals that are fed these products. These things are cheap and easy to grow at scale, and with using government support makes them cheap to make food out of. And it also makes it difficult for small farmers who are growing real food to earn a living.
Yeah, so there's a huge number of government supports that are historically entrenched. They came from good historical reasons that we needed to sort of support production, but then it has turned into policies that really incentivize farmers to grow a lot of these sort of what I often refer to as commodity crops, and makes it hard for smaller farmers to access land, get crop subsidies, crop insurance, get a lot of the other supports that would help them be more successful.
So turning to policies, some examples of what policies affect is food access in the general public. This is fairly obvious to us, but others, like policies around food safety and worker issues, not so much. Could you highlight some entry points for people that are interested in the topic?
Yeah, so I'm gonna actually focus on a project that we've been working on for several years at the Food Policy Council, which is adoption and implementation of the Good Food Purchasing Program. So this is a purchasing policy that schools adopt that seeks to shift the food supply chain to be healthy, fair worker treatment. There's 5 value categories: nutrition, fair worker treatment, animal welfare, sustainable, and local economies. And so it's a little bit like lean certification, that they evaluate their supply chain on those 5 values and then work on bidding and contracts to improve the value categories. And it took, we brought a coalition together. We worked for a couple years to get Cincinnati public schools to adopt this policy. And when they adopted that policy, we all thought, oh, wow, this is like gonna be so impactful, and it was gonna be so great. And in some respects it really has been, but in other respects, it's been a big learning experience about how many policies are in place that restrict or sort of force what the school food looks like. So on the one hand, it's really been amazing. Jessica Shelley, who's the food service director, has done a great job buying local food, because there was a local food hub that is an aggregator that specializes in buying from small farms and getting their product to large institutions. And so when they adopted this, that was a great start. And then through the pandemic, because there was this policy, CPS continued to buy local food from that food hub, even as they had to redo their food distributions to kids. And what that meant was dollars flowing to local farmers who might have lost almost all of their other sales to all institutions and restaurants. So it may have saved those farms' businesses, but it also saved the food hub itself, which means that now as we start to reemerge into normal life and restaurants open and start looking for that supply chain, the infrastructure and supply chain still exists. So it's really a huge deal. On the other hand, this is about 5 value categories. It's not just local food. And so one of the value categories that people look at, that maybe people have learned a lot about in the last couple of years, is worker welfare, as we've seen how essential workers are and how abused and vulnerable they are within the food supply chain. And so one of the places where that is particularly bad is in the meat packing houses. And we saw that that some of the meat packing houses were declared essential infrastructure and forced to stay open in the pandemic. And it would be great if CPS could just buy meat from the people who are doing the good meat processing and treating their workers well, but it's not that easy, because CPS has to buy a lot of their food based on a very limited budget that's provided by the USDA, and they're heavily regulated by the USDA that food needs to meet very specific nutrition standards, packing standards, and also that they have to sort of buy from specific companies that have contracts with the USDA or with other agencies to supply that meat. And so if they don't use it, then they don't have the funds that they need because of how the funding structures are set up. And so one of the approaches we're taking to that is actually to advocate for more institutions to adopt these good food purchasing program values or something similar in order to open up more supply chain and to get those products flowing into the city, because CPS just isn't actually that powerful of a buyer, even though they seem like such a huge buyer. So that's just one example of things we're working on in our region to try to shift some of the overall food supply chain through policy advocacy.
Well, Michaela, you have really demonstrated with just that one example how complex the issues can become. There are such a number of entities and decisions to be made involved in getting food on the trays in the schools. And this is daily, and through COVID and through the summer with summer meals that are distributed. It's pretty amazing. I wanted to point at a particular policy that's recently come to my awareness, and that is called the Family Farm Regeneration Act, which was introduced and passed in the Ohio State Legislature on June 28th. It passed by a vote of 96-1 with a local congressman, Tom Brinkman, Republican in District 27, who was the sole no vote. And I use this example to encourage people who care about keeping our food coming from regenerative farms that are taking care of the land and delivering good food to become aware of these things and help pass this vote in this, or this bill in the Senate this year. I think you've worked with some of the statewide legislators, right?
I haven't worked specifically with any of the statewide legislators yet, but this specific piece of legislation is being championed by the Ohio Ecological Food and Farming Association, as well as Young Farmers Coalitions and a number of other organizations, because the access to land is a huge challenge for a lot of beginning farmers. That as a lot of farmers sort of age into retirement, they often are selling their land either to other really large farmers or to developers. And so if you're not in a pipeline of family to inherit farming land, then often it's really difficult to find land that you can affordably farm. And so this act is a piece of legislation that's aimed at helping more young farmers get into or continue in the business of farming, so that we have people growing food. I do work with a number of organizations who do work at a statewide level. There's the group called the Ohio Food Policy Network, and there's a Kentucky Food Policy Network also, both of which are networks of organizations bringing together food policy, food council activists to identify common priorities across the state and coordinate advocacy on these issues. And so, for instance, OFA, who's been doing the Family Farm Regeneration Act, has also worked with Produce Perks Midwest on advocacy for more nutrition incentive programs that match the dollar that people spend on SNAP to purchase at farmers markets and more fresh produce. Again, to help both people get access to more food and afford it, but also to make it more, to help farmers have more of a market also. And so those are both groups that, if people wanted to get involved at a state level, would be a great point to sort of plug in and learn about what are the policy issues at the state level that affect all the different components of the food system. At a national level, we're also really lucky. We have Sherrod Brown, who is a senator from Ohio who is on the Agriculture Committee, so he's on a really important committee at the congressional level. And he's been a great advocate. He just introduced the, I'm gonna forget what it's called.
Kids Eat Local.
Kids Eat Local Act, which is a piece of legislation that proposes financial assistance to schools for purchasing local in order to open up those budgets and make it easier for people like Jessica Shelley to be buying direct from farms and supporting the small farmers in their communities. And so then at a really local level, I have worked with a number of agencies and officials around policy for our region. And within Cincinnati, we have two great policies that I'm collaborating on implementing. One is the Green Cincinnati Plan, which has an entire section on food sustainability. And we're working closely with OES on operationalizing those goals. And then within the Cincinnati Health Department, they have what's called a Community Health Improvement Plan. They have addressing food access and neighborhood scale food retail as an issue that we are collaborating on trying to find solutions to. So if people are excited to get involved in policy and food, there's a lot of different places at every level of government where food systems or decisions are being made that affect the food system that people can get involved in. And if they want to learn more, I would say the best place to go is the Food Policy Council's website, which is cincinnatiregionalfood.org, and they can find my contact info there. And I'm always happy to have a conversation with someone and talk about what are their interests and how we can get them plugged into the food advocacy in the region.
Great. That sounds really good. I just received an email yesterday speaking about a East Price Hill neighborhood organization that is just trying to pull together to look at issues of food access in this neighborhood. So I will be able to share with them some about this garden that we're looking at today. But for this part of the interview, I want to thank you for coming and sharing your work. I hope this inspires more people to pay more attention to food policy issues and choose some way to get involved. You can look at the Bold New Democracy video at boldnewdemocracy.org, and we'll close for now. Thank you.
And thank you, Sue Ellen, for this opportunity. I love getting to talk food system with you, and I'm excited to be reaching new audiences.
Remember, the issues we talk about here are directly related to our political process. As a citizen, you have the power to influence this process through your vote and your voice. Don't be afraid to use them.